Good morning, everybody. Thank y'all for tapping in. Willie Walker BH Organic Minds Podcast, episode 4. Today we're gonna be tapped in. I want to thank everybody that tuned in yesterday. Yesterday we did like 4 times the amount of streams that we did the day before that. And I've been trying to get everybody in here who used to watch me on Facebook and getting people in from Instagram and continuing to grow. So for everybody who watched the podcast, Organic Minds, and tapped in with your host, Willie Walker BH. Please share the video, like, subscribe, content, leave comments, tell people about it. That's the best way to get everything to go further. This morning we got some great topics. We're going to be talking about, we're going to talk about the monkeys in South Carolina that broke out, which I think is crazy. We're going to talk about Phil Snyder a little bit, right? We're going to talk about the African presence in Asia. And then we also going to deal with a couple other things. So while we getting ready and I'm getting everything together, we're going to play some music and get some things together while I'm tagging. All right. While everybody get in the room. Good morning. Good morning. Told us first we gotta deal with self. All I know is go and get this shit, want no handouts. Trying to make a million in this rap, I'ma stand out. People won't support you when you broke, they ain't fanned out. Let you make a million, everybody got their handout. Just remember on your mission, you was riding by yourself. And ain't nobody wanna help you, so you do it for yourself. You remember being open just to take another's help. And there's so many niggas flaws, so you just do it for yourself. I don't need a deal for it. Niggas play you sideways, they don't think that you would kill for it. People think you broke cause they ain't see you sign a deal for it. Bro, I got problems cause I seen a lot of problems. Wonder why I act violent cause I seen a lot of violence. Misled by the TV trying to stack up all my dollars. I was trying to see a Benz, I was trying to see a scholar. I was trying to serve a fiend, I was trying to go to college. I'm just trying to have a dream, I was trying to be a jobber. Like, can I have my dreams and my vision, people? Or do I gotta rob and gotta do it legal? We all started out as pawns in this game of wealth. And everybody got a problem with me being self. See, you only think you fly with that Louis belt. Broke pride, the type of wealth don't got to do with self. Before you started judging everybody else, the elders told us first we got to deal with self. See, I was trying to help, I'm trying to deal with people. Knowing rapper needed shelter in the field of evil. But exposing them the truth on how to deal with people. Was trying to teach them how to fly like I was Delta Region. Obstacles are obstacles we had to tackle. When you front a niggas work, then you got to tax. Watch a nigga take a loss when he playing for it. Niggas talking like they bosses, but they paying for it. Look, when we in transition, I'ma play the score. Put a ruler in my stick, no, I'm aiming for it. Niggas talking like they shit, but when you play with toilets, and niggas aiming at your soul like they gaming targets. For all you niggas talking crazy, I done played the summer. And niggas catch you with them pipes that we done paid the plumber. And all you niggas at the top that ignore my feelings, just keep your energy the same when you see these millions. Like, can I have my dreams and my vision, people? Or do I gotta rob and gotta do it legal? We all started out as pawns in this game of wealth. And everybody got a problem with me being self. See, you only think you fly with that Louis belt. Broken pride, the type of wealth don't got to do with self. Before you start to judging everybody else, the elders told us first we got to deal with self. Like, can I have my dreams and my vision, people? Or do I got to rob and got to do it legal? We all started out as pawns in this game of wealth. And everybody got a problem with me being self. See, you only think you fly with that Louis belt. Broken pride, the type of wealth don't got to do with self. Before you start to judging everybody else, the elders told us first we got to deal with self.
This game, you're not ready for it.
Yeah, look, I ain't no flaw, nigga. Selling beat bags, you a fraud, nigga. Stunting when you pull up in them cars, nigga. Acting like a bitch, you a broad, nigga. You ain't a star, nigga. Choppers in the car and we ain't letting niggas take shit. I spend a lot of money, I ain't taking off breaks. I ain't running from a problem, little nigga, I'm a face. They be wiping up the man, they ass broad, shorty base. Little bro, he ain't a fella, so he riding with the cutter. Standing taller than the tree. Little brody, he can cut up. He all that you can be, nigga. Better join the army. Couple thumpers in the seat, case a nigga try to harm me. Know a nigga got 10 chains. I been selling work up in the hood since the 10th grade. Never ever chillin' with a nigga cause you bitch made. I ain't never trust no nigga cause he snitch made. They be out there talking to a priest. I ain't never trust no nigga. I ain't trust no label. I be doing this shit without a deal. People say they for you, but the people ain't real. Motherfuckers don't love you, they just in it for the thrill. Look, I ain't never trust no nigga. I ain't trust no label. I be doing this shit without a deal. People say they for you, but the people ain't real. Motherfuckers don't love you, they just in it for the thrill. See these people so flawed, nigga, in it for the money and the cash and the cars, nigga. Everybody with it, everybody a facade, nigga. Music is a lotto, you just gotta beat the odds with it. I ain't signed no deal, so I still own it. I'm a prime, nigga. You been acting funny, you been talking about a body. Finally got some paper and you threw it on the thotty. I don't waste money, I spend it on a grandson. All that flashing ain't no money when the feds come. Niggas talk crazy, they be ballin' with them thin chain. Niggas can't play me if you know me, ain't shit change. Every time I sell a fucking puppy, it's a new chain. Hey, fucking record like I'm lucky, like it's Wu-Tang. No, I keep a 40 in the seat, that's my Wu thing. Bands on the set, they gon' turn them into loose chain. Chopper got a kick in his shit like it's Luke Kane.
Tagging the world up.
Look, I ain't never trust no nigga. I ain't trust no label. I been doing this shit without a deal. People say they for you, but the people ain't real. Motherfuckers don't love you, they just in it for the thrill. Look, I ain't never trust no nigga. I ain't trust no label. I been doing this shit without a deal. People say they for you, but the people ain't real. Motherfuckers don't love you, they just in it for the thrill.
Why did Amazon send me $20,000? Because I use Amazon AI. I'm gonna show you a way.
Bro, I miss my dog, but I ain't talking kennels. Broke it in the car, but we ain't talking rentals. But when you from the fog, you learn to drive with caution. We just trying to beat the odds before we line coffins. Damn, I miss my bro, and the streets was like a father. So I asked the question, is it heaven for a robber? Try to kill my image, musically I resurrected. Spiritually I'm free, and I ain't taught to know the tenders. Realest in the street, but he can't even afford a lawyer. Feds was on his ass, cause he ain't never had a lawyer. He was out lurking, shooting niggas over conflict. He ain't fall in love with killing, he just fell in love with profit. Look, a lot of niggas murdered, cause these women, they be gossip. And these niggas pillow talk instead of talking to their partner. Everybody playing tough, since everybody is a mob. And everybody run a team until you take them off the roster. Everybody talking guns, till they shot and in the doctor. And I'm just trying to have some fun. You acting niggas win an Oscar. Know that I came from the slums, learning how to read your posture. All I wanted was respect. Now that shit, it ain't an option. Broke it in the car, but we ain't talking rentals. Bro, I lost my dog, but we not talking kennels. But when you from the fog, you learn to drive with caution. We just trying to beat the odds before we line coffins. Broke it in the car, but we ain't talking rentals. Bro, I lost my dog, but we not talking kennels. But when you from the fog, you learn to drive with caution. We just trying to.
Story we've been following since last week. 25 runaway monkeys have been captured after escaping from a research facility in South Carolina. Veterinarians say the recovered monkeys are in good health, but 43 of them total escaped last Wednesday when an employee failed to fully secure a door. That means 18 are still on the loose. To give you an idea of where this happened, the lab is in Yemassee. That's in the southern part of the state, about 60 miles west of Charleston. CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff is in Atlanta with more on the efforts to capture the rest of the monkeys. Dave, this is just a wild story. And I want to ask you, because I know that officials said there's no risk to people, but don't interact with them and close your doors and windows. I mean, those seem like two sort of conflicting ideas to me. Do they pose a risk to people who live in the area?
They do not, because these are adolescent females who have not been involved in any kind of testing whatsoever. They haven't received vaccines or any kind of diseases, anything like that. They are way too young for that, Lindsay. But just as you were doing that intro, just as you were reading the 25 were captured, I just got a text message just seconds ago. And we now know that 2 more have been captured. So now we are up to 27 of the 43 that were on the loose for a while. I'm just reading this right now. He said they'll know more after 5 p.m. because their efforts are continuing. And the efforts out there, Lindsay, are to put out these traps, very humane traps.
So the first weird thing about this story is, first of all, there was I think 40 or 60 monkeys that broke out of a place that was that they all broke out of a place that was in South Carolina, and they running around and they doing everything they supposed to do, right? So these monkeys broke out, and then they on the news acting crazy, talking like it's something wrong with them. Like the monkeys, they broke out and they accidentally left the door open. So publicly they said, oh, don't worry about these monkeys. They don't pose no harm to society or nothing. But then instantly told you to stay away from them. Hold on, y'all. Let me make sure I'm live on Instagram. Gotta make sure we on everything. So basically these monkeys broke out. They got out. while they was doing everything that they were doing, what ended up happening was they told the people, don't worry, they're not a health hazard, they're no problem, don't be worried. But then they said at the end, oh, don't touch them, don't come in contact with them, which I felt was kind of weird, because how do we go from not touching them, I mean, they're not a problem of public safety, to leaving them alone and not touching them? Then we found out next that they were testing viruses on these monkeys. So make it make sense. So that's one of the things that I was noticing, and that ended up being a big deal. And it became a bigger deal because I don't feel like they're being truthful with the public about everything. Because if they were testing on them with viruses, then did all of the monkeys, or any of the monkeys infected? Were they all cured? Like, they didn't really give a lot of information. And most of the time it's just very short what you'll see about it.
Traps that have a fruit trail leading up to it. And as they get in that trap, the door just gently closes. And they are curious, they're hungry. They want everything from apples to bananas to peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
To catch a monkey, now we know. So you mentioned what authorities are doing there. I mean, have they given you any clue as to how long this could take?
It depends on how much fun these monkeys are having just over the fence. Now, we were at the fence line just on Friday, where we saw all of these monkeys who were just kind of hanging out there in the trees, and they're watching us as much as we are looking out for them. What happened on Wednesday is they had a caretaker who was trained on this. She opened a door to go cleaning the inside of the enclosure with a spray cleaner, with a pressure sprayer. And she didn't necessarily lock the gate. She closed the gate, but she locked the gate. One of them got out. And then we're learning that the term monkey see, monkey do is based in reality. After one got out, just one after the other, 43 of them went out of this locked enclosure. And the enclosure is maybe like 100 feet or so from the gate. And then, or from the fence, and then they went over the fence into.
So basically, somebody left a door open. They saying that they accidentally left a door open, and one monkey got out, and then the other like 43 monkeys got out. But like I said earlier, it's weird to know that they said that these monkeys cause no threat or no harm to nobody, but then they say, oh, well, don't touch them and don't stay away from them. And then they tell you at the end of another newscast, because this happened like a week and a half ago, and then the first ones were saying, oh, well, don't touch them, and they were being tested on, and with viruses and stuff like that. And so I'm like, what? Like, and they just walking around South Carolina. It's like they said they caught a couple of them, but it's still some walking around. And like the chances of them getting all of them back. And a lot of them still by the enclosure, they say, but I think that it's weird, and I think that it's crazy. And don't be surprised if you see like monkeys. And then the crazy part was they're the rhesus monkeys. So if y'all study my show, y'all know that in ancient times they say that they use the rhesus monkey to create certain human beings. And I thought that was interesting because these are rhesus macaques, right?
To the trees, and you can see them, you can hear them, and they're just over that fence. So they're not very close to anybody's property. There's a woodsy area, just like these trees behind me, and they're kind of like up in the trees, and but they're getting hungry. They don't have fruit up there for them. So the fruit is on the ground and it's near the traps.
When you said monkey see, monkey do, I thought you were about to say some of the monkeys started power washing. But I do want to ask you a more serious question about something I was being a little flippant about. What kind of conditions were they living in? Is there any reason to believe they escaped because they were being mistreated?
Well, it depends on how you feel about animal testing in the first place. These animals are being tested for vaccine production, not at this facility. This facility breeds them for the people who would do the vaccine testing. And once they go to the secondary facility where they're doing that testing, they have to test them from anything for development of HIV vaccines to COVID vaccines. This is how we got the COVID vaccine so fast, is because we were able to do testing on rhesus macaques, which are very, very similar DNA-wise to humans. So it just depends on how you feel about that. Some people have one.
It is very close DNA-wise. See, they skipped over it very fast. They said that when they came up with the cures, they're part of the reason. But why? So now we got to go back to science and start to understand why the Moors and them said that they used the rhesus monkey or the rhesus macaque to graft certain races of people, right? And I'm just using it, not being funny. So when they're testing, because it's a whole lab full of a bunch of rhesus monkeys. So the reason is because if they test on the genetics of the rhesus macaque or the rhesus monkey, then they share common DNA. And certain people, like there's a rhesus monkey genes. What's the name of it? The R. What is it? In when we studying blood, and I'll show y'all one day when they were studying blood. There's a blood type that is like RX or something like that, which has the rhesus monkey gene in there. That's in the human family. So when they said they testing on it, it's because why? Because it has a lot to do with the genetics of them, right? So that's why they're testing. You don't find a lot of people of color or something with the rhesus monkey gene.
Feeling about it. Some people have another feeling about it, but they are bred for this actual testing, and then they're moved over to another facility that actually does the testing. We're in close contact with the CEO, who is trying to get them back as fast and as quickly as possible. But as you've heard, that this has happened before, once before, but in that case, the just a handful of monkeys got out and they came back and they went inside their chamber or their facility that they're in. It's kind of like an open air it's like an open air facility that has a fence around it, and they have places for them to swing on back and forth. It's not a cage by any means. We saw those when we were there on Friday, and they were able to swing through there. They were able to have fun, interact with each other. It's pretty open air inside the fence. But once they get outside of there, they have access to the trees over there in South Carolina. And
what's up?
Hi, Jira.
I'm going
We
to
brought
a
you here
different
today
video.
to let you know that
I was going to a different video just so I can see it. Like, I think that it's weird, and I believe I was muted the last time, so I apologize. I think it's super weird that they, like, the guy went out his way, what I was saying, he went out his way to say, oh, well, they're not enslaved, they're not in jail, it's in a habitat. Like, no, they in a building. So they're still enslaved, they're still taken. There's nothing that they could do about it. But the fact that he went out his way at the end of that to say that there was nothing wrong, and I'll show y'all. We'll go back to the end.
possible. But as you've heard, that this has happened before, once before, but in that case, the just a handful of monkeys got out and they came back and they went inside their chamber or their facility that they're in. It's kind of like an open air it's like an open air facility that has a fence around it, and they have places for them to swing on back and forth. It's not a cage by any means. We saw those when
It's not a cage by any means. It's an open air facility. Yeah. See, it's funny how America and the world got a way of enslaving things, but swearing to the rest of the world that it's not. Oh no, the American blacks, they have their own places, apartments, they have their own, we build these buildings for them, we call them projects. They got public housing, they get water, you know, they get all of this stuff, but they ain't telling you that they charging us for water, the project's fully, right? So it's that type of thing that just rubbed me wrong.
And we continue to go in depth tonight. 8 monkeys still missing after 43 of them escaped a low country research facility. But when the monkeys escaped more than a week ago, it was rather warm outside.
Yeah, but the primates are not used to being on their own. And with cooler temperatures coming, Fox County's Dana Winter asked an upstate expert, how cold is too cold for these monkeys?
Hard to say because I don't know if they're kept in cages inside or if they have outside cages as well. So like you or I, if we are, let's say, living.
I thought he just said that they weren't in cage. See, I just went to a whole nother one on Fox, and the first thing they told us is about they start talking about Cajun.
In Florida and then suddenly go someplace cold, it's going to be rough on us. And they have thicker hair, but if they've been kept inside, it might get kind of rough for them if it gets really cold. But in the wild, they live in a wide temperature range. So no, I don't think that that would be a problem for them as long as they're kind of acclimated to the outside. They should be fine.
You know, when sometimes I'll say, you know, here's the fun fact about this animal, or, you know, here is, you know, where this animal is famous from. Is there anything like that that stands out about these rhesus macaque monkeys?
Well, I know that in the early days of our space research, they sent some monkeys out in the rockets into orbit. So were known for that. They did that as well with chimpanzee, but they did use rhesus macaques, and they're really, you know, these are monkeys, and so they're very intelligent. They're able to, you know, they probably knew immediately when that poor animal keeper left the door unlocked. They could see how to open the door immediately and get out, and I'm sure they noticed right away that the door was unlocked and this was something different. So they're super adaptable. In India, I think it's somewhat maybe too adaptable because they get into people's trash and, as I said, into their crops. And the older ones.
So basically, they like, if you know anything about the rhesus monkey or the rhesus macaque, they very smart, but they very violent. Like in India, they be walking around there still like they'll dance, want to be dancing for the owner while they steal his fruit and food. You know, but the point was, this is South Carolina. This ain't too far. And they said 43 monkeys broke out that they were testing viruses on. You can sugarcoat this how you want, but something's very weird about this. And then they trying to get them back inside. So just remember that if y'all see some weird monkeys in y'all neighborhood in a month or two, because they going to travel. Everybody not going to go back. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to give y'all that to start off this morning. To know that in South Carolina, there's a whole bunch of monkeys with viruses and diseases walking around. So if they out there messing with the animals and they gonna get hungry, so think about an animal that they bite or something and then they move forward and the animal escapes and then it changes the ecosystem. So it's just something I wanted to point out to y'all, which is crazy this morning. But the second thing I want to go on, and we're gonna move on today, I wanted to talk about the African presence and give me a second. Dang, they did me dirty. The African presence in Asia. And because I told you we did, and a lot of times in the convo for the last few years, we did for the people that was with me then, we did a lot of stuff on Nile Valley, Egypt, Nubia, right? And then we also was able to tap in. I tapped in with y'all about a lot, but I said I promised that on the convo that I was going to start. And I'm still talking to this mic over here if y'all see me leaning. I wanted to take us to Asia because we still gonna do the Nile Valley and the Nile, and we still gonna break that down. But we also gonna talk, we're gonna get into Asia and we're gonna get into America. So today we're gonna talk about the Olmec Civilization, and we also gonna talk about the African presence in Asia. And I want to make sure I still got everything. And Phil Schneider, that was my other topic. Phil Schneider, which invented the diamond drill that I was talking about the other day. I got some video. For everybody who watching, please like, comment, share, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button to help me. Leave comments. If you're on Facebook, leave comments. Tell me what you like. Give me feedback. Inbox me. Share the video. You know what I'm saying? Like it. If you're on Instagram, same thing. Just write in the comments. Let me know that you're in here. And I thank everybody for coming in. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the African presence in Asia. Right? So this is where we're going to start from.
I no longer think that the most important thing is to have all the answers. Perhaps the most important thing is to figure out the questions that we should be raising. African presence in Asia. And of course, here's my book on the subject. I've written, let's see, I have 2 books in French on the African presence in Asia and 5 in English now. And this is the most recent one, and this is probably the best one. African Star of Asia, the Black Presence in the East. So let's just look at some of the images. This one, for example, is in the Louvre. This is the figure called Gudea, the most powerful figure of the civilization called the Sumerian civilization. In the Tigris Euphrates, interesting that the nose is broken off or missing at any rate. And also the interesting hairpiece or crown. The Sumerians call themselves the black-headed people. Another one of Gudea, this is about 4,000 years old, 4,100 years old. From ancient Iran. And this is right here in the British Museum. This is a figure, I believe it's actually Phoenician, and it's in a place called, in what is called the Nimrud Ivories, but it looks like it's purely straight out of the Nile Valley. This was a time when Egypt was a dominant cultural influence in this part of the world. This is from a place called Lachish. This is the Assyrian capture and sack of the Judean city of Lachish. Detailed, this is one of the figures from there. This is also in the British Museum. If you come on the tour tomorrow, you'll see it. Here's the tomb of Bilal in Syria. I don't even know if it's there now, considering all the turmoil there. But Bilal was the first muezzin, the first person to climb into the minaret and call the faithful to prayer. And this is in the 7th century. He's so pious, he's referred to as a third of the faith. The Prophet Muhammad, who himself is said to have had African lineage, is supposed to have told Bilal once, Bilal, last night, I dreamed that I went to paradise and I found that you had been there before me. That's quite a powerful statement. And in the early history of Arabia, you find figures like Antar ibn Shaddad, who was the father of chivalry, a dashing knight and poet before King Arthur, before Richard the Lionheart, who weren't really very chivalrous in actuality. His mother was an Ethiopian, his father was an Arab. He led troops into battle. And then this is also, and again, in the British Museum, and this photograph, I believe, is in the book, either the one on Europe or the one on Asia. And this is an Ethiopian soldier in the Persian army fighting the Greeks. This is around 2,500 years old. Of course, this takes us to South Asia. And this is from ancient Pakistan. And this is a sister for sure. Just look at that hand on her hip. This is 4,000 years old. It's now in a vault in the National Museum in New Delhi, India. It's only 3 or 4 inches high. I've actually seen a replica of it that they put on display. An image of the Buddha as a youth. And this is from the Ajanta caves in Western India. And this is just one photograph of, I'm sure, what the people who built those ancient civilizations actually look like. And this sister, you could see, is from a very downtrodden community from ancient Afghanistan, 2,000 years old. And this image takes us to Southeast Asia. This is Angkor Wat in Siem Reap, Cambodia. Angkor. This is one of the faces of the Bayon Temple in Cambodia. This is my favorite temple in the world. I like it even more than the ones in Egypt. I'm going to climb it again, God willing, in January. I need to lose a few kilos.
See, if you notice that a lot of this stuff, when you're looking at these pictures and like when you see the nose shot off of one, he said it was Sumerian. We know that in Egypt that a lot of time the Greeks and a lot of them shot the noses off, or Caesar and them shot the noses off because they were Africoid, meaning that they had African features and they just wanted to shoot them off. They were so irritated by it. And when you see in Cambodia and some of these places, you could tell, if I go back, you see this right here? you can tell that this stone actually had color to it, right? And when I'm looking at it, you can see the melanin on this, like the black face. You could tell that this was painted dark. So it's just up to us to pay attention.
Larry, to lose a few kilos. These are apsaras from Southeast Asia, kind of like Buddhist versions of angels. Another face from the Bayon Temple in Cambodia. Are you all following me? Okay. You know, sometimes when you do these presentations and you do them so long, you just kind of take for granted that people know what you're talking about. And, you know, you say, well, maybe everybody doesn't know where these places are. And you kind of have to stop. I don't mean any disrespect. I just want to make sure we're all understanding each other. This is from Cambodia. This is about 800 years old. This is the cover of my first book in French on the African presence in Asia. And that face right there is part of the entrance to the great city of Angkor Thom. Not Uncle Tom, but Angkor Thom. Thailand, from the part of Thai history called the Dvaravati period. The Dvaravati phase in Thai history.
These Buddhas?
Yes. Buddhas, and I guess you could say bodhisattvas. Now, this is from another phase in Thai history. This is a photograph I took in a museum in Paris called the Musée de Met. Image of Shiva from Vietnam. I think I showed that one earlier, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go to China. I believe this one is from the Tang.
What if I told you that instead of setting up a green screen, you can just click a button into Script and get the
Dynasty in central China. And this one as well. This is in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Here. Painted black. I've seen, I think, 3 of these now. There's one in the British Museum.
And I definitely want to say this. I think it's important and powerful that when we watch these videos that I show you, so I could take you there with me, right? Like just me speaking about it, when a lot of times when I be live and I be talking about having these conversations and continuing to educate the public about true history, it was one thing when I noticed when I would sit down and I would talk to you about it. And it's another thing when I take you and I show you, when I'm able to actually give you an idea of what we mean when it says that historically, when you watch movies, they're incorrect. Often the European and these other races, a lot of them didn't even exist. Not what we know today. Like when you go to Asian, you see the light-skinned Asian, and you go to these places and see all that. These people didn't even exist at the time. And that's true history. So that's why it's important for us to see it and to be able to get better at what we're doing. Like really, to really get people to identify, they have to. Seeing is believing. Always remember that.
There's one in the Sackler Gallery in Washington, D.C., and sometimes they are described as acrobats. And this is from the Tang Dynasty. They all have very tightly curled hair, generally painted black, and quite often have their fist in the air like that. This is from the Tang Dynasty, the classical period in Chinese literature and art. From the Yuan Dynasty in China. And I don't know if Darren showed me this or one of your colleagues. We had a flyer with this we used on there 2 or 3 years ago. And it's beautiful. And I'm going to show you a companion piece. Also from the Yuan Dynasty, this is the Mongol Dynasty, done by Kublai Khan. This is in a museum in San Francisco, but it's not on display. And this is Bodhidharma, who supposedly took martial arts from India to the Far East. This is also in the Victoria and Albert Museum. This is my own photograph. And here's the other one. I think that these 2 pieces are companion pieces. And these are details of a painting of Chinese.
Look at these paintings. of ancient China, right? On a podcast, I'm gonna allow them to really speak and chime in here and there, like I was doing on Facebook. But look at these paintings of Buddha Dharma, right? We're talking about the original people of China. Good morning. For everybody tapping in, I want to say good morning to y'all. But look at these original pictures, right, of indigenous China. And they said recently on the news that often the Chinese people don't even know their own history, right? Just like in most countries, they don't know their own history. So that's part of the biggest issues and part of the problems when we dealing with all of this is the fact that we're dealing with nations of people who have false histories around the world. So that's why when we be educating and when I be places, I get an argument. I've gotten in debates, should I say, with people that say, you know, black people or so-called black people need to stop putting themselves in places they didn't exist. And I'm saying that's exactly what we telling y'all. Y'all need to stop putting y'all self places because these movies and things have confused it. But we can't be ashamed to stand on our history and to know the truth. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start. And we're going to dig in Asia for a minute. We're going to constantly come back to Asia because the more you know about Asia and China, it'll help you understand who you are in America and where you come from and your ancestors. Because you got to know everything in order to move forward.
Scroll, I think from the 14th century. And these are in a museum, as I understand it, in Taipei. And I'm thinking that next year or the year after that, I'm going to do a special trip to China in order to see these, or at least go to Taipei, Taiwan. Here's one of many images of Fudo-Mayo, one of the 5 wisdom kings in Japanese mythology, a patron of the samurai. And there are 2 proverbs that have been used to suggest an African presence or black presence. One is for a samurai to be brave, he must have a bit of black blood. And the other one goes, to make a good samurai, half the blood in one's veins must be black. Uh-oh. My bad.
Look at these.
This one takes us to China, and this is, or actually it takes us to Paris, which is where this piece is, which is called a Tigris. It's a bronze libation vessel called a U vessel of an ornately carved tiger made of bronze from the Shang Dynasty in China, protecting a little black man. Now, when we first started to show this picture way back in the 1980s, we thought it was a black child. But the more that I've examined it, that's a little black man there. And I think that he represents what the Chinese perceive as the first people of China. Now, this is in the Cinucci Museum in Paris, and here's a close-up of it. This, I think I took from a postcard.
And you want to know what's crazy? When I see this statue, and what he's reminding us of the first people, that this is not a little boy, that's a man. And the pygmies, and it seemed like the oldest people all over the world, when you go to the most ancient cultures, they're very small people. So the most ancient people were very short, like very, very short, like 4 feet, 3 feet, some of them. And in Africa, they called the pygmies. And they migrated, of course, but they was called God's favorite historically, right? So when you see these, you constantly see these same depictions around the world, right? When you got the dragon, you still dealing with a serpent, right? When you're dealing with the cobra snake, you still dealing with a serpent. When you're dealing in South America, you still dealing with forms of serpents.
And this is my own picture right here. You can see a detail. Yes, let me see. I think there's one more that I wanted to show. I've gone through Asia fairly quickly. I have to make up for that tomorrow. All right. There's a companion piece. But we'll move on. I thought this was the companion piece right here, because there's another one. I found another one of these in Japan. In fact, let's just look and see. Is this the same one as this one? Let's look at the facial expression. No, they are different. This one looks kind of like, more belligerent, like the evil twin of this one right here. So this is the one in Paris. And this is the one in the Sumitomo collection in Kyoto, Japan. And this is another place that I hope to be able to see. I've been to Japan a couple of times and even lectured there a couple of times, but I haven't been to Kyoto. So you can see their companions. And I think these are the only two that I know of in existence. It must have been the property of a very wealthy person to have these. It's bronze. Let's look at Europe and let's look at the Americas and we'll call it a night. Here's the cover of the book, The African Star in Early Europe. Robin Walker wrote the preface to it. And this looks at the African, what I'll look at now is the African images from the great civilizations of Europe. For example, this is a shell inlay at Oxford University, the Ashmolean Museum. This is about 3,700 years old. This is from the island of Crete. And also at Oxford, this image of Andromeda, painted black with blonde hair. Andromeda in Greek mythology was described as an Ethiopian princess. Her mother and father were the king and queen of Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia today is not the Ethiopia of ancient times. The word Ethiopia means the land of the burnt-faced people. And it was a word that was introduced by the Greeks, in fact, and also used by the Romans. And it was a term that was applied to much of Africa beyond Egypt. The Greeks and Romans, or Greek and Roman scholars, went to Egypt, spent considerable time there, but for the most part, they were not able to explore Africa outside of Egypt, or what we now call Africa. And according to the Greeks, Andromeda was an Ethiopian princess, and she married the man named Perseus in Greek mythology of the historical country of Persia. And of course, in Greek mythology, Perseus was the man who slew the Medusa, the Gorgon.
I be having to unmute my mic, y'all. I apologize. And I be want to remind y'all that when they talk about Persia, they saying that the Greeks said that she was from Ethiopia. They're basically saying that she was from the land of the blacks, not from what we know Ethiopia today. And it said that he said about Perseus from Persia, but Persia was also a dark-skinned civilization. You see this picture that's behind me? Let me move out the way. Let me show you real quick. See this picture behind me? It's Persia, but this is their prisoners. The point of it is that it's still a dark-skinned civilization. When Iraq, Persia, Samaria, they're all the same place.
This, I think, is about 500 BC.
To see more videos like this, subscribe to.
Now, I would say this. When I look at all of these pictures, and before I move forward, I want to stop on some of these pictures. I just want y'all to pay attention to some of these images. Kind of going back and forth. Hold on, y'all. Look at the nappy hair. And I just want to put this in your psyche before we move forward. Look at how dark the Buddha is. See this, when I tell y'all that when you look at people like the Greeks, they could not be readily identified. You see how you can see the features of the black lips, and then you can see like the nose is a little flatter, and then you see the long ears. See the ears on this person, and they got the long earrings like the old African ears, like the people that had them long ears. That's the key when I be trying to express before I move forward. I just wanted to really show y'all this. We're gonna get deeper into the African presence in Asia, because in order for me to take, hey man, be quiet. In order for me to explain clearly on the show, to understand who we are in America, we got to go into Asia and China first. And this is what the book Destruction of the Black Civilization was trying to tell us, that we got to go into Asia and China to understand what happened. We got to know Asia and China's history, the indigenous history. We got to know African history in the Nile Valley. We got to know what happened in Europe and Spain in the Renaissance era. We got to know what happened in America and pre-Columbian history, right? And that's where we going, but they all connect. The story doesn't make sense without all the rest of the pieces, right? So next we're going to go into the study of the Olmecs, aka the Za people. And so the Olmecs, which I always tell people, with a older civilization found in Mesoamerica, because that's what, at least that's what they tell us, because it's at the bottom. Now, they was building in stone, and these stone heads had proof, and that's why I say, well, let me give y'all more insight of Asia and China. And the more I give y'all this, when I dig and as we go further in the podcast and I start getting into the deep information, it'll make more sense if you have a foundational understanding of the Olmec culture, Asia or China, right? Samaria. That's why it's good to get, we're going to do the foundational work so that when we get into the other stuff, it make a lot more sense. Bear with me. Hey, everybody who in the on live or in the chats, please share the videos. Help me get the podcast out to everybody. It's been a minute. So I know y'all wonder why I keep turning my head. I got my microphone. It probably popped in. But please share and like the content and help it grow. And I appreciate everybody for tapping in.
Now, without further ado, we will delve directly into the indigenous peoples of this land. The indigenous. When the enormous monoliths were uncovered from Mexico, the sculptured images that were carved to form 24-ton heads from a single mass of basalt rock had been discovered. No one suspected this mysterious part of a civilization that only seemed to have vanished. At the cultural paradox of this civilization, Levanta, 18 miles from the Gulf of Mexico, 4 colossal heads were unearthed. The monoliths had been carbon dated. The results of the carbon-14 test of the stone heads found in Mexico caused a startling uproar amongst archaeological circles. Various additional testing was performed. However, the earliest date that the carbon testing came up with regarding the stone images was the year 291 BC. As more diggings were performed in Middle America, larger heads were discovered. 24 tons was the.
And I want y'all to pay attention and look at all of the heads that look African, or as we know, and all the heads that got Asian, Chinese influence, like the mixture. Keep your eyes open on that.
Average sum of the weight. The new discoveries were even more mysterious, for the colossal heads continued to turn up even earlier dates. 4 heads in all were excavated at the city of Levanta alone, with the largest head standing 9 feet tall. Ancient Middle American civilizations, or Mesoamerica antiquity, is divided into 3 epochs: archaic, before Christ; classic, during the first 1,000 years AD; and post-classic, from 1000 AD to Spanish conquest. The monolith of Levanta was dated and placed in the archaic period, which proved the existence of a civilization in Mesoamerica thousands of years before organized monotheistic religions. Perhaps more staggering than the result of the carbon dating of these stone figures is the apparent construction and proportions of the monoliths. According to archaeological circles, the statues were constructed from one massive chunk of basalt block mined from stone quarries 80 miles away and transported to the center of Levanta with a sum weight of 20 to 40 tons each. It seems these stones were rolled over vast tracts of land or transported down a river on wooden rafts, however, presenting somewhat of an illogical and even incomprehensible method of material transportation. The monoliths proved to be only elementary in cultural archaeology. At present, between 25 and 40 archaic period Mesoamerican sites have been discovered. The majority of these finds have occurred in the states of Veracruz, which totals 246 recorded pieces with over 180 sculptures, altars, and stone heads. The revelation of this hidden civilization reconstructed the indigenous history that has now been extended to reveal a hidden past. It is apparent that the archaic period preceded even some of the great civilizations of the East, 900 to 400 BC. The people of this period were not primates. These archaic indigenous inhabitants belonged to a class of Homo sapiens, thus leading to the belief that the ancient America, despite the narrow-minded kaleidoscope view of cave dwellers and tree climbers, was a highly advanced civilization. We see this in the advanced artistry and sculpturing, which was quite different than the art and sculpturing of tribal cultures. Mesoamerica archaeology proves enough data to suggest that these inhabitants were a high-status group with the presence of elite leaders, a military force, a political hierarchy, and a quite obviously, or at least sensible, penal system, as opposed to a primitive tribal culture's vigilante methods.
And they let me know. This the thing. So, and I apologize, my mic be muted. They be muting my mics. We still waiting for them to dig this up. A lot of these heads are not just heads, they're actually full bodies. But you got places like Levanta, where they prove that these stone heads are at least 50,000 years old. And the misconception that I've been talking about lately is that when I talk to a lot of people recent, I tell them, like, when we think of Stone Age, we think of primitive, we think of bam, we think of everything but what it really is. When we think of Stone Age, we thinking of primitive people. But I found from digging that Stone Age meant when man was building in stone, right? So the Olmec Civilization is at least 50,000 years old. And I think it's important for us to understand that, and it's proof that the black man, and you know, if he was here, the black woman was here, was on this continent for at least 50,000 years. That's what this proves.
The punishment. Historians speculate on the actual racial identity of these inhabitants. Many hypotheses suggest that the archaic inhabitants were of Mayan linguistic stock. The contradiction to this hypothesis would be that the inhabitants spoke an ancestral form of mixed Zoqueen. Other historians speculate that the people who populated Mesoamerica were Mongoloid people who crossed over between Siberia and Alaska and were called Paleo-Siberian or ice hunters. Upon research in the etymology of the term Paleo-Siberian, we find paleo from the Greek word pale to mean ancient or primitive. Siberian has dual meanings. Sib from the Greek word sipa to mean kinship, family related by blood, and Aryan from the Sanskrit word Arya to mean noble, in reference to the Persian language. Area also denotes a sub-tribe of people who migrated from Turkey into Palestine and were given the name Caucasian from the regions of the Caucasus Mountains. However, the stone images were not the depiction of Siberians or Mongoloids. The archaeologists are not in agreement with the identity of these inhabitants, or more correctly, have denied indisputable truth of their origin. However, since the mysterious unearthing of the ancient civilizations, one name has surfaced from later transcriptions. The name was Olmec. Who were these people called Olmec? Can we speculate that these people of the colossal heads were Asians who crossed the Bering Strait, or Siberian icemen who migrated from Europe? Jose Maria y Serrano, upon excavating one of the monolith heads in this region of San Andreas Tuxtla, published a short passage in the Bulletin of the Mexican Geographical Statistical Society, and I quote, "As a work of art, it is without exaggeration a magnificent sculpture. But what most amazes me was the type that it represents, a Ethiopian African. I conclude that there had doubtlessly been black Negroids in this region from the very earliest ages of the world." Unquote. In 1939, Dr. Matthew Sterling led a joint team from the National Geographic Society into the Gulf of Mexico to spearhead a major digging operation in Veracruz to unearth the monolithic heads. Sterling concluded, and I quote, "The features are bold and amazingly Negroid in character." Unquote. The archaeological cultural data overwhelmingly confirms the depiction of.
He said the sculptures are Negroid. See, the more you dig in history, the more you realize you'll get familiar with these terms. Whenever they start talking about, they said the American Indian was Negroid at best. When they went to Mexico, they said these statues are Negroid. When they was in Africa, they said that these people are Negroid. When they was in India, they said these indigenous people have Negroid features. And they are the same, you know what I mean? Everywhere they went, when they study ancient China, they tell you that they had Negroid. And this is why we say I've been certain and was saying he used the term so that people could understand, because these were the terms that they were using. And that's why you get familiar with them, because these are like code words and key words. Just like when you study ancient time, and a lot of time you hear the word Berber, you hear the word Muslim, it often translates to what they would say more, right? And nothing more. Like, we're not so much pushing anything too much. We just looking at history and the historical evidence. That's my job. I'm not here to try to make anybody be a more or anything, but just we need the history, right? Regardless of what you believe, stand on your history.
Negroid faces. Further archaeological evidence of the Negroid in ancient America is found in the Monte Alban culture, which seems to have begun at the end of Olmec culture. In Monte Alban, 140 Negroid-type figures have been discovered. Upon archaeological research, there is no logical denying of the Negroidness found in the art of the ancient Americas. Although there has been denial amongst historians, archaeologists have indeed confirmed at least 4 major facts. Number 1, the Olmecs date back to the Archaic period. Number 2, the Olmec Civilization parallels the dynastic periods of Egypt. Number 3, the Olmecs were not Paleo-Siberians or evolving Neanderthals. And number 4, evidence points to the Olmecs being of African ancestry. Skeletons have also been unearthed in pre-Columbian layers in the valley of the Pecos River that flows.
And when they say, I want to say this, recently there's a study, and I'm gonna bring that up one of these mornings. Well, a lady found out she'd been studying, the black lady had been studying the Neanderthals, and had been studying everything that had to do with the Neanderthals. And then she found out and came to the conclusion that even the Neanderthals were dark skinned. So it's a whole nother part of history that we got to investigate. And I just want to say that. So even with them being Neanderthals, they were dark skinned. They just were more of a cave dwelling people. And even the Caucasians, we're learning that's why in the book, Destruction of the Black Civilizations, it make more sense now. When we go back that far in history, thousands of years ago, it said that who we call the Chinese black man, when they stole 1 million women from the Nile, they said 500,000 went into China and Asia, and the other 500,000 went into the Caucasus Mountains. And then it was telling us that the Israelites in the book, The Destruction of the Black Civilization, come off the branch coming out of the Caucasus people. So even these people at their base, at the original forms, were dark-skinned people, right? This is what they're finding out, because the word Caucasian means Caucasus and Asian, right? Not just one, right? So it's a lot more investigating of why they were called Caucasians, because they have Asian in your name. That means you had to have some what they would call Negro blood.
Goes through Texas and New Mexico and empties into the Rio Grande of the Gulf of Mexico. Professor Houghton, a physical anthropologist, concluded, and I quote, "The Pecos skull resembles most closely the cranial of Negroid groups coming from Africa, where Negroes commonly have some perceptible infusion of Hamitic blood," unquote. The Pecos skull resembles most closely the cranial of Negroid groups coming from Africa, where Negroes commonly have some perceptible infusion of Hamitic blood, unquote. Professor Houghton refers to Hamitic blood. Hamitic blood is the blood of the Negroid, since the Ham Shemites were the dark seed which were forbidden to interbreed with the Canaanites.
You remember when Kanye said, "I'm about to go ham"? I'm about to go ham. This is what he's talking about. Ham. Aramaic. Now I want to remind y'all, see, this is why I love the more you learn and dig. Right now on the screen, I want y'all to look at this picture. It said that, you know what I'm saying, the Hamites, when we dealing with the Bible. All of this connects. And it's translated as black, right? Now, it says in biblical Aramaic. What did we learn from the biblical scholars in the last year? We learned that Mary and Jesus spoke what language? Aramaic. I just want to point that out. Jesus and Mary, when they lived, they spoke Aramaic. It's like a form of Arabic. So when we see this picture on the screen, it's saying Ham, right? But Aramaic. These are why you connect the dots.
The word Ham translates as black in biblical Aramaic. Finds like these, in addition to the Negroid style heads, forces us to consider the parallel between ancient America and Africa. However, historians dismiss these similarities as mere coincidence. Archaeologists, on the other hand, conclude that the Olmecs who sculpted these monoliths have been shown to be absolute masters of realistic portraiture and did not arrive at the distinct Negroid features by accident. It is also noted that there could not possibly be a coincidence of stylization of a distinct people with facial features and characteristics which separate.
I remember Dr. Ben, every time Dr. Ben would talk about this stuff, he would say, you know, they got some nerve to say that the only reason why they carved those big noses and big lips in the statues because they didn't have the tools. This is what they say in the books in school, that they didn't have the tools to carve the lips to make them fine. But yet when you look on these statues, a lot of them got fingernail designs in Egypt. They got all this small detail. BS. Completely BS. You know what I mean? So pay attention. Everything that's carved and depicted is for a reason. But I want you to know that when you research and read, especially in a lot of American literature and in the schools, they will say that they didn't have the proper tools. And they still say, well, they don't understand how a primitive people could build it. You know why you can't understand it? Because common sense would tell you that these people are not primitive.
Separates them from the features and characteristics of all other races on this planet. There can be no room for geographical coincidence that the very period that the Negroid appeared in Mexico, that was the same period when the first pyramid, mummies, and hieroglyphics began to appear in Mesoamerica as well. Is it a coincidence that the Teotihuacan head of pre-Columbian Mexico greatly resembles?
Did you hear what he said? So everybody watch Black Panther and Teotihuacan, right? You remember that he came and the last Black Panther and his people from the water? Even I did a live back then telling you that the movie was an improper depiction of what those people look like back then, or who built those pyramids. They were brown and dark skinned, right? So the whole idea in Black Panther, but see, what they did was they put the Hispanics today face on them, because you can look at some of the statues and see some of that feature or phenotype of what we see of the Hispanics today, because they're our brothers and they also are, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't until the Portuguese came and they started breeding that they started breeding to be lighter, to not be treated like the dark-skinned ones, as they were called the Black Moors, right? But Teotihuacan was really an ancient civilization of dark-skinned people. And I'm gonna bring it back a little bit. So that's for all my Black Panther people, because when you heard them say Teotihuacan, it should have resonated.
With facial features and characteristics, which separates them from the features and characteristics of all other races on this planet. There can be no room for geographical coincidence that the very period that the Negroid appeared in Mexico, that was the same period when the first pyramid, mummies, and hieroglyphics began to appear in Mesoamerica as well. Is it a coincidence that the Teotihuacan head of pre-Columbian Mexico greatly resembles early Mandingo clay heads and Nigerian images? Many of the historians today have confirmed to the speculation of the Olmec monolith heads. They cannot explain the representation of the Negroid, despite the coloration, the fullness of the lips, prognathism, tattoos, tribal markings, and tribal scarification, kinky hair.
I'm gonna tell you who some of these people were, and we're gonna get to this too, and I'm gonna remind y'all of this as we move forward. Y'all remember Mansa Musa, whose real name is Abubakari, when he was the king of Mali, but his grandfather and his older brother left him the throne at like 11 at a young age, and then they took like 200 boats and they went to the New World. Now, when he got older, maybe like 6 to 10 years later, like 2 boats came back. They said they lost like 50 boats, but half of the boats went into got lost. They got pulled in 2 different currents, and one went into what we call Mexico, and the other one went to the bottom of South America. But they said that over half of them did make it, and they lost some people at sea, but they made it. So these South American empires, when they say they looking like these people or these people, I want you to know Mali is over here by what we would call Nigeria today. It's the land of Mali or certain things, that's just the main port. That probably was just the capital of Mali where the gold was, because the word Mali mean gold, like I always say. But there's proof. This is how we use information. Mansa Musa and them, and then he left Africa when he did his pilgrimage going into Mecca, and he went past Egypt into the Middle East. And why? Because those descendants that are our descendants, the Moors and all the other descendants, are a mixture of the Nile Valley people and the Chinese black man who was originally an indigenous African, right? So that's why he made his pilgrimage back to his homeland, right? But that's what to him, because he knew where his ancestors that came from, the mixture. And then he went to the Americas too. Even Mansa Musa didn't stay on this continent.
The broad nose and the Egyptian-style military accessories. Historians now speculate that the sculptures were not constructed by Negroid people.
And I want to say it clear, I'm saying that he did not stay in the African continent. He left Africa and came to America.
But perhaps by Asians. If this had indeed been the case, why would people erect such huge monuments of Negroid representation? Why would Asians build colossal monuments to portray the Negroid of?
And not only that, but think about it. They're telling you that there's African things on there, like the colors they're using, and you really go and study. But more importantly, it had to be somebody extremely wealthy to come to America or be in the Americas and to get all of these stone heads. There's hundreds of them, and they're 50 feet tall. This has to be somebody of great wealth and understanding, right? And these stone heads, and I want to remind you, like the pyramids in South America, some of them are bigger than the pyramids of Egypt, right? The base of the Pyramid of the Sun in South America and the base of the Pyramid of the Sun, which is, the 3 pyramids. One of them is the Pyramid of the Sun, it's the Pyramid of the Moon. Just like in South America, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. And anywhere you go to China, there's pyramids of the sun, pyramids of the moon. Everywhere you go, it's a Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon. The bases of the South American pyramid and the pyramid in Africa are the same. Exact.
Africa, when they had their own gods and legendary heroes. So realistic are these representations of the Negroid that it is extremely difficult to suggest that these figures were constructed by anyone other than Negroids themselves. Were the Asians attempting to construct an Egyptian metropolis by erecting Negroid stone heads, pyramids, clay pottery, which is identical to the Egyptian and even the Nigerian art? How could the Asians arrive at the startling similarities between the Olmec civilization and the Egyptian civilization? Even more absurd than these claims is how the Asians built these monolith heads. It is interesting to note the similarities between the mysteries of the construction of the Olmec heads and the pyramids of Egypt, both Negroid civilizations. The historical professor's hypotheses are in fact denials of an ancient Negroid civilization in America, which predates all other ancient civilizations and cultures in America. No one has denied that the Olmec civilization is perhaps the oldest of America that stretches back into antiquity, nor is there any legitimate denial that the Olmec monoliths represent Negroid people. However, there is denial that the true indigenous people of America were Negroid. Research shows that the Olmecs did not mysteriously vanish as suggested by historians, but that the Olmecs migrated far north.
So tell me y'all don't see in some of these the Chinese representation. If I started to realize, like, when you look at these places, like I see some of these look like people from the Nile, some of these look like people from Mali, some of these look like Chinese black people, right? And look at what they used. Look at the type of stones that they made the mask out of, to let you know, because at this point they already knew. By the time they were doing a lot of stuff, they knew that things were being destroyed, and they knew that they were going to lie and cover things up. So when you go to China and you see all these depictions of these dark Buddhas, as they showed earlier in Asia, and these dark masks, that's what they're trying to tell you. This clearly has a Chinese Asian influence. The American black is more a mixture of the Nile Valley people, the Chinese black man, right? And even the Persian, because we got to think about these kingdoms existed and we left, and our people stretched out all over the world, right? And we're so far from understanding who we truly are that's why we so lost. Like there's definitely more than one type of what we would call black person all over the planet, because they all had dark skin, but the phenotype and the certain things, the high cheekbones, like in Mesoamerica, where they talking about, pay attention to how the cheekbones of these statues are kind of like mine. Exactly. I ain't gonna say kind of, because I remember I was young and I got stopped by this historian who was asking me who my family was because of how my cheekbones was, and they looked like the statues in South America.
And mixed in with the 4th century Chinese missionaries under Buddhist monk Hugh Shen, who traveled to what is now California and produced what Columbus mistakenly called Indian and the British called the Red Man. Other Olmecs migrated to Southeast America and established settlements. Research suggests that Olmecs mixed in with Negroid traders from Morocco, the Moors, thus becoming known as Washoe, and established governments and sovereign nations thousands of years prior to the arrival.
Boom. See, the issue is that when I'm studying Egypt, I kept finding the Moors. When you study Europe, you keep finding the Moors, right? But all of these places, you tend to not realize where is their homeland, where is their foundational base at in America. I want you to pay attention to what he just said.
America and established settlements. Research suggests that Olmecs mixed in with Negroid traders from Morocco, the Moors, thus becoming known as Washoe, and established governments and sovereign nations thousands of years prior to the arrival of the Europeans. These claims have thus been repudiated by historical circles who have gone beyond the call of duty to counteract the suggestion that the original Native American, in every sense of the word, were African, Negroid, Black, Egyptian America, and established settlements. Research suggests that Olmecs mixed in with Negroid traders from Morocco, the Moors, thus becoming known as Washoe, and established governments and sovereign nations thousands of years prior to the arrival of the Europeans. These claims have thus been repudiated by historical circles who have gone beyond the call of duty to counteract the suggestion that the original Native American, in every sense of the word, were African, Negroid, Black, Egyptian, or Nubian people, and not red men living in huts and teepees. So,
let me tell you why this is important. This is important because when we understand the government and digging in the law, and you find out that the Moors had created a court system, and the Moors were very pivotal in creating civilization in many places, not just here, but many civilizations around the planet. What we realize is that we're getting more foundational information saying that the Olmecs and the Moors mixed and became what we know as the Washoes, right? And they established civilization and governments around America. This is supported by the law books in America when it says, you understand the Free Moors Act. When we get Mount Rushmore, we get all of these things: the builders of stone, the ancient information, everything, navigation of the waters to get here. How we, it's a lot of things. And I just wanted to leave that piece for people that wanted to dig, and we need to really dig in that area.
who were the Olmecs? Where did they come from and why? Why does the Olmec culture parallel Egyptian culture? Who are the black gods carved in the stone found in Mexico? Did the Olmecs simply vanish, or do they still exist today under various names like African American, Negro, Black, Mexican, Puerto Rican? Is there a cover-up governed by archaeological and historical circles to hide the present identity of Olmecs in order to protect the land that would otherwise technically and literally be owned by these indigenous people? We owe it to ourselves to unearth the largest find to date. This find is that of the very first Americans. Where did the Olmecs come from? The Olmecs came from Nuba in Central Africa, and they migrated to America, in which they named, in their Kushite language, Utala, which means vacate. When the Olmecs discovered that there was actually a North Utala and South Utala, the word Utala became plural, which became Atlan, which is where the word Atlantis and Atlanta came from. The Olmecs were a tribe in Africa called Dogon in Mali. When the Dogons migrated to America, they also imported the rubber tree, which is only indigenous to Africa. The Dogons used the sap from the rubber tree to make shoes, coats, capes, and they were the first to introduce soles on shoes in the New World. The name Olmec means rubber people. The rubber was also used to make large balls for the Olmecan ball game ceremonies, which was played in large stone arenas. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the West, he states that he saw natives kicking around a large ball that was made of some type of acacia. Columbus took some of these trees and balls back to Spain with him, and today, soccer is the favorite national sport of Spain. These Olmecs set up empires and cities that predates even the Inca, the Aztecs, and the Mayans. The Olmecs were not Siberians. The Olmecs were dark-skinned, big-lipped, wide-nosed Africans, just as they are portrayed in the stone monoliths. The step pyramids of Egyptians closely resembles the step pyramids found in the Americas. The double crown of Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt with the bird and the serpent is also found in Olmecan culture, with Upper and Lower Egypt being Northern and Southern America. The Mexicans have 4 calendars. The fourth calendar is identical to the Egyptian calendar. In Mexico, there was found a type of paper.
I want you to see the connection. I want you to really think about it and see the connection. They got in Africa, there's Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. That's what they called it. And Lower Egypt was at the top because, you know, it's up, south, down, north in Africa. But they realized that the Americas was like Africa. There was a north and a south. So that's why as we come upward, because we're going to go from the bottom up into the Americas, there's more pyramids in America than there is in Africa. And we need to investigate this and try to figure out what's the reason. Nobody would build more pyramids in a place that's not their homeland, right? But it is crazy that we just learned a couple things, that they believe that the Olmecs mixed in with the Moroccans or the Moors and they established governments. We realized that they had a ball game. They was playing what they call soccer, and they had a game where they threw the ball through a basket, and that was the first version of basketball. The game is ancient with these rubber basketballs. But the goal wasn't this way, it was this way, and they threw it. And the game mimicked the universe, like how the earth travels through the universe when you throw the ball, the way it falls with gravity.
Paper made from a specific type of wood pulp that scientists say can only be found in Egypt. Even the ceremonial dance of the Hopi Indians is identical to the Dogon's Bado dance of Africa, using the same symbols and spirit names. Various tribes, such as the Osage and the Apache, use the crescent moon symbol, which is the national symbol of Angola, Mauritania, Tanzania, the Sahara, and Algeria, all found on the continent of Africa. Previously, I mentioned that the Olmecs and the Chinese combined to produce the Red Indian, and I will delve deeper into that right now. In the 4th century, a Chinese missionary under the Shang dynasty named Ho Xian, or Hu Xian, came to America in search of his people, who were the East Yi, meaning the Black Chinese. When the Chinese arrived, they encountered the Olmecs, who had already been living on the land. The Chinese considered the Black Olmecs as the descendants of the Black Chinese, Yi people. Hu Xian's people settled and mixed in with the Olmecs and produced the Aboriginal. The Olmecs gave the lower kingdom to the Aborigines. The Aborigines called the land Mujian, which is a combination of the Olmecan Ashuric Aramaic word Mu, which means one, and the Chinese word Zhan, named after Hu Shan.
So you see, this is not only, it's not a myth. In the destruction of Black civilization, when they said that those children from China, that their mothers were slaves, but their children were free, and the children went back to Egypt. Now, hear me always going back to this. They went back to what we call the Nile Valley and established Egypt. They brought in algebra, calculus, high-level mathematics, because the people that created the Qing dynasty that conquered, and then what we know China today, they were ancient Africans who migrated over. They were a great people, very intelligent. Those children, so we talking about, this didn't happen right away. We talk about hundreds of years past. And then they come and they take these women from the Nile, like sex trafficking, and they produce these kids. So it's like getting the blood of a more indigenous woman and bring it in. And now these are the kids. So as you see in America, the Qing dynasty, they went to America looking for their lost ancestors. What ancestors? The ancestors that left those children, as we say, that nation, a whole bunch of them that left, who became known as the Moors, who also became, right? Because they said that the Qing dynasty, which was China, who originally they come from the bottom of Africa. And they tell you that on their walls. But they said they was looking for their lost descendants. And so it makes even more sense when they said earlier that the Olmecs, they were like Mansa Musa and them people who they had the Moors. That's why they were Arabic. They did Islam, right? They built all of the schools, Timbuktu in Africa, all of that. Mansa Musa and them built Timbuktu and all them colleges and mosques on the way on his last pilgrimage. They were super rich. Well, rich is an understatement. So they came there, and then they saying that when the Chinese came, because they said they long lost ancestors. So they came, and then they got reintroduced, and they said they gave those people, because they were family, the bottom. This is what we call Mexico. Mexico is the middle ground. Talking about South America. So when you look at the phenotype of why the statues look like that, now you're getting more of an understanding, because there's an understanding that the Qing dynasty came over looking for their lost ancestors, right? And the people of Mali went over. Mansa Musa came later looking for his lost ancestors. But what they all had in common was this thing we call, Arabic, or should we say Islam? But the true form, not what we know as religion today. But I think it's super important. I'm gonna go back a little bit.
Of the Olmecan Ashuric Aramaic word mu, which means one, and the Chinese word Zhan, named after Hu Shan. Did you know that there was a province in China today called Zhan, and that this is the site of one of the only Chinese pyramids? Muzhan became Nizhan, and eventually became Mekzhan, or Mexico. The Aborigines called themselves Mexicans, and
also the word Mu. It was a time where they said the whole planet was called Mu, or the Moors went by Mu or Moors. So it just show you the translation of these words.
Remixed with the Olmecs, which resulted in a sub-tribe called the Hopi. The Hopi clan was taught the religion of the Dogon and given the secret of the stars. Several hundred years later, the Hindu East Indians arrived in Mexico, and they called the Hopi. The Hopi clan was taught the religion of the Dogon and given the secret of the stars. Several hundred years later, the Hindu East Indians arrived in Mexico, and they...
Now I want y'all to pay attention. It says Inuit, the Aztec, Inca, Toltec, Mixtec, and Mayan. 5 barbarian nations. Now I want y'all to pay attention to what it's saying. That's why I went back. I read what it's saying. Mayan relocated and sailed to East Asia. And became known as Inca. These are what pyramids in Cambodia. That's Cambodia. Maya means illusion. The ending is the result of the mixing of between the Olmec and the Chinese. Native Americans for glory. Indian were used for Chinese blood. Mexicans continue to mix with the remaining Chinese. There's books on this as well. Pablo and Manso, Chinook, Kitani, Calapaya, I don't even know what that is, Unit, and others, right? So it's just breaking down the bloodlines and how it goes and what they look like and how we got to where we're going today. And this was a nice way of him doing it. He's breaking it down without going through all the history. And there's a book like going from the understanding that the Portuguese came, right? So they showed you that they came here, right? And there was people already in the north, but they came here, they mixed and they created, right? And then there's also, you seen the Chinese came, then the Indian man came, who we know as the Indian man, right? And then the Portuguese. And then they brought people that they had enslaved from the Pacific Ocean. This is where we get all of these mixtures and these different tribes that we know of or that we were taught of. But they were all foreigners or coming in, mixing and becoming people that eventually at this point they're indigenous, but they really want the original people. If we go back to talk for a long time.
Be wondering, hey, he just kind of, and Shane C. This literal translation of
Let's get back to it.
To whom not Kunte is interesting because Kunte, Baridachi has set up a sovereign nation of Washita Moors that is recognized.
Keep doing the music.
Today, Macon is also the home of the Harriet Tubman African American Museum. The Yamasee is the mother tribe of the Creeks.
I just wanted to get past that.
As the Caribbean. The other group of Olmecs traveled north and settled in Southeast America and became known as the Washoe, which means raccoon people. These people settled into areas of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Georgia. The Washoe mixed with the Malian Moors of Africa who also came over. The result of this mixing was a tribe of pure-blooded Black Native Americans called Yamasee or Yamasee. The Yamasee resided in Georgia and were the mother tribe of all dark southeastern and eastern tribes. Yamasee is a direct descendant of the Olmecs through the Washita Moors. The Washita is a derivative of the term Wichita, who are known as Kit-Kitish, which means raccoon eyes, which refer to the Black Native Americans because of their faces. Thus the term coons was used to identify a Black person. The Yamasee lived in Georgia on the Ocmulgee River near Macon, Georgia, and where the early Yamasee mounds were discovered. Today, Macon is also the home of the Harriet Tubman African American Museum. The Yamasee is the mother tribe of the Creeks, the Seminoles, the Apaches, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Catawbas, and the Cherokee. In the 1700s, the British, French, and Spaniards mixed into these tribes. In 1715, the Yamasee rose in rebellion against the English and allied with the Spaniards. Some of the Yamasee Creeks migrated to what is known as Savannah, Georgia, and became outlaws under the tribal. As the Yamasee mixing with the African slaves, the Yamasee and African runaways had a few things in common. They were both of the same ethnic background, they were able to blend in with each other, and they both had hatred for the British. Throughout slavery, thousands of African slaves escaped the plantations and sought refuge with the neighboring Native American tribes. The natives had an incredible knowledge of outdoor survival and location. It is often believed that Harriet Tubman herself, who freed slaves via the Underground Railroad, was herself a Black Native American because of her knowledge of the paths and the terrain. Many African slaves and Native Americans mixed. Even the Red tribes took in African slaves. Some tribes even owned slaves. However, unlike the Europeans, Africans were mostly considered
And I would say this because I was muted. I'm sorry. When we hear stuff like that about her, we start to realize that they're giving us little jewels that we could take with us and say like, oh, that she might have been Yamasee, because the way that she knew the land and could move around. And we got to take that when we reading and researching and we get little increments like that, we got to be able to say, wait, so it's a chance that she could have been kidnapped or taken from indigenous people. That's why she knew the land so well to get so many people out of there. And we got to take the information and move forward on it, you know? So pay attention. It's always great information.
indentured servants and treated as human beings by their Native American owners. Today, there are Red Seminoles and Black Seminoles, Red Creeks and Black Creeks, Red Cherokee and Black Cherokee. The Seminoles, they did oppose slavery. The U.S. Army prosecuted the Seminoles because they opposed slavery. The Seminoles realized that the people who were being sold into slavery were a faction of them, distant cousins, relatives in a way. The Black Seminoles was the only tribe at the time that opposed slavery. U.S. slaveholders tried to cause tension between Red Seminoles and Black Seminoles. Thus, a war erupted between the Seminoles and the U.S. slaveholders. Seminoles and African slaves joined together and attacked slave plantations. General Andrew Jackson prepared to wipe out the Seminoles. Jackson gathered Creek tribes along the U.S. soldiers to destroy the Seminoles. This war lasted for decades and extended all throughout Florida. By 1826, wealthy Creeks who had also owned slaves were sent to persuade the Seminoles to join in on the slave trade. When the Seminoles once again refused, Seminoles were kidnapped and sold on the southern slave markets. The U.S. Army was also trying to push the Red Seminoles out of Florida onto reserved Indian territory west of the Mississippi. The Army was faced with much opposition with the resistance of the Seminoles, who were guided by the Red Seminole chief Osakala. The Red Seminoles knew that the whites would not follow after them for their fear of alligators and snakes. The Black Seminoles remained in Texas and moved into Oklahoma, Idaho, and mixed in with the Blackfeet, Comanche, the Kiowa, Apache, the Mandan, Omaha, Osage, Pawnee, and Arikara, and their closest relatives, the Wichita. You know, people wonder if the actual Blackfoot Indians got their name because they were Black Americans. And, you know, that's not necessarily so. The Blackfoot Indians got their name because they would stain their moccasins with burnt ashes. The Blackfoot tribe was at one time Saskatchewan Native Americans who relocated to the Montana in search of buffalo. The Blackfoot or Blackfeet consists of three divisions: the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piegan. The entire group is known as Blood and are descendants of the Wichita Yamasee Moors. If you look closely at many Native American tribes, you can still see their African traits. You may wonder, are there any Black tribes left? There is a woman named Verdiachi Washita Turner Gaston L. Bay, and she is the legal heir by blood to the Mason Rouge land grants that were willed to her by her great-great-grandfather, Henry Turner. Verdiachi's land is the District of Louisiana, which is named after her great-great-great-grandfather's friend, Louis Bougainville, who sold the land to Joseph de Maison Rouge in 1795. Joseph had a daughter named Anne, in which the land went to her. Annie named the land Louisiana after Louis and Annie. In 1848, the U.S. government took the Turners to court to take the District of Louisiana. However, the government lost, and the land was granted to the heirs of Henry Turner, Verdiachi Washita Turner Gaston L. Bay. Verdiachi has set up a sovereign nation.
You see, all these years that I set up here on Facebook and on radio, and I was talking about the Moors, I wanted our people to recognize in America that we have a direct connection to the land and the estate. All right. To be very clear with everybody, this is another proof, right, that the land, she said, was in 1794. And then they won. And this is the Wichita area. I believe this is her. This is probably the grandmother of Chief Warhorse, because she looked just like Chief Warhorse, who's, I don't know if she's still alive, but that might be her. Just a younger picture. I think that's her grandmother. But the land, you got the Wichita Moors, right? The mounds, where these mounds are, where if you go out there, the Wichita area is like Louisiana. In that area, there's mounds. And where they got like the inside, you know, when they having the meetings in like the, what is that, Congress? The way it's designed after one of the stone buildings, and like it's like outside. And that's where they got the same layouts for DC, or some of the prints for DC. But it's just to show you that this land has ownership, right? And if you listen to the name El Bay, these are Moorish titles. Day, Bay, El, Il, and Ali. Those are Moorish titles, right? Malcolm changed the name to El Malik Shabazz when he left the nation. So I want you to pay attention when he said, you know, it was El Bay. I'm gonna go back a little bit so we can get that history.
Known as blood, and are descendants of the Wichita Yamasee Moors. If you look closely at many Native American tribes, you can still see their African traits. You may wonder, are there any black tribes left? There is a woman named Verdiachi Washita Turner Gaston L. Bay, and she is the legal heir by blood to the Mason Rouge land grants that were willed to her by her great-great-grandfather, Henry Turner. Verdiachi's land is the District of Louisiana, which is named after her great-great-great-grandfather's friend, Louis Bougainville, who sold the land to Joseph de Maison Rouge in 1795. Joseph had a daughter named Anne, in which the land went to her. Annie named the land Louisiana after Louis and Annie. In 1848, the U.S. government took the Turners to court to take the District of Louisiana. However, the government lost, and the land was granted to the heirs of Henry Turner, Verdiachi Washita Turner Gaston L. Bay. Verdiachi has set up a sovereign nation of Washita Moors that is recognized by the United States government. The Subcommission on Prevention of Discrimination and Protection of Minority Workers Groups on Indigenous Populations recognized the Wichita as the oldest indigenous people on the earth. The U.S. government does not own the District of Louisiana, as we may believe. Also, the state of Georgia is owned by a Yamasee. It is documented. Many Native Americans signed treaties with the U.S. government, but never actually sold any of their land over. Technically, the land still belongs to the so-called Indians, not the federal government. So you may be wondering if I'm trying to say that out of the 550 some odd Native American tribes, they're all descendants of black people. I'm saying that all so-called American Indians descended from the Mexican Olmecs and the various African and Asian mixtures throughout. How does this make other Native Americans feel, especially today's Red Indian? It is important that we as Americans understand the origin of the so-called American Indian, and it is important that we accept the truth. Black Indians are no more native than the so-called red man in culture. The culture and religion that is practiced by today's Native Americans is the natural, non-theological concept of the Malian Moors of Africa, the Olmecs, and the Aztecs of Mexico, as well as the early concept of the mound builders. There are various tribes today that will admit to their African ancestry. The Hopis, Apache, Aztec, Zuni, Nez Perce, Miami, Blackfoot, Catawba, and Seminole all possess knowledge of African ancestry. What's more important is not the feeling concerning indigenous people, but more so the truthful data and the validity and acceptance of that data. You may be asking, why do Red Native Americans believe that they are the first? Well, many Red Native Americans are well aware of the information that I've just presented to you, and some are not aware. Tribes like the Hopi, Aztec, Apache, Pueblo, Seminole, Creek, Tuscaros, and Susquehanna have documents in their possession that tells the stories of the black gods who gave them birth. In fact, the Hopi Book of the Stars that was given to them by the Dogons tells that when the forefathers, Africans, reclaim their throne, the black and red tribes will join together and overcome their oppressors. There is a similar parable in most Native American cultures that speaks of the white eagle who has captured the red eagle until the black eagle freed the red eagle. The white eagle retreated into the cave from which he came. Look up this story. It's an actual Native American culture. It is just as important for Native Americans to understand true history as it is for Black Americans to understand true history. Blacks have been convinced that they are all ex-African slaves. Of course, this is a lie. There had been blacks in this country for thousands of years before the first Europeans. There are millions of blacks in America today who, if they trace their family heritage back, will not find any African slavery in their family. Many blacks are children of the Yamasee, Seminole, Creek, Cherokee, Blackfoot, Shoshone, etc. However, the U.S. government, in order to protect their best interests, has kept most of this information and true history from us. The U.S. government has convinced us to classify ourselves as a title that the European political system created in order to place us in a certain social bracket, African American. As an African American, we have no inalienable or indigenous rights under the Constitution. Even worse, as an African American Christian, we dig an even deeper hole for ourselves. As Black Christians, we have to admit two things. We are former slaves by calling ourselves African, and we are former slaves who converted to the slave owner's religion. Thus, we sever any connection to sovereignty or self-identity. As African American Christians, we literally become dependent on the government and relinquish all indigenous and self-governing classifications. Thus, we throw ourselves on the mercy of the U.S. judicial system. Native Americans have what is called autonomy or self-government, similar to diplomatic immunity. As indigenous people, we have the right to set up our own sovereign nations. We govern our own judicial, legislative, and penal system. As African Americans, we waive the right of self-governing and indigenous rights by admitting that we are immigrants, came over from somewhere else, and not indigenous. Now,
the whole point of what he just said, which I love about this documentary, I didn't even know it was in here, is saying that through your connection to the Moors and your Olmec blood, because this is New Amexem, North America. Old Amexem is Olmec, that's the South America. So just like South Africa is older than North Africa, right? But he's saying that when you claim to be something like Black or African American, you're claiming to be a foreigner. So there's laws and rules that apply to you. But if you understand who you are, then you have the right to create your own governments, your own land, right? And that's the journey for our people to get to. And I love that about this documentary, that he even went into detail about it.
you may be wondering, hey, he just kind of skimmed over that little part about the blacks mating with the Chinese to produce the Red Indian. Well, I'm going to attack that right now. You may be wondering, were there even blacks in China? And the answer to that is yes. There were indeed blacks in ancient China. The skeletal remains from southern China are predominantly Negroid. The people practiced single burials, which is an African ritual. In northern China, the blacks founded many civilizations. The three major empires of China was the Jia dynasty, the Shang Yin dynasty, and the Zhao dynasty. The Zhao dynasty was the first dynasty founded by the Mongoloid people in China, called the Hua. The founders of the Jia and the Shang came from the fertile African crescent by way of Iran. Chinese civilization began along the Yellow River. Here the soil was fertile, and black Chinese farmers grew millet 4,000 years ago, and later soybeans. They also raised pig and cattle. By 3500 BC, the blacks in China were raising silkworms and making silk. The cultural hero Huang Di is a direct link of Africa. His name is pronounced in Old Chinese as Yuhai Handi or Hu Nak Kunte. He was supposed to have arrived in China from the west in 2282 BC and settled along the banks of the Low River in Shanxi. This literal translation of Huang Yi to Hu Nak Kunte is interesting because Kunte is a common clan name among the Manding speakers. The Africans or blacks that founded the civilization in China were often called Li Min, meaning black-headed people, by the Zhao dynasty. This term has affinity to the Sumero-Akudan term Sa-ge-ga, black-headed people. These Li men are associated with the Chinese cultural hero Yao. We know very little about the sound of the ancient Chinese because ancient Chinese was very different from Old Chinese and Middle Chinese and the modern Chinese dialects. This results from the fact that the Chinese dynasties were founded by a diverse ethnic group. Jia and Shang Li, i.e. Black Shang, were founded by Dravidian and Manding speakers. Shang Yin was founded by classic Mongoloids, and Zhao by contemporary Chinese. This explains the difference in pronunciation for ancient Chinese spoken by the Jia and Shang peoples and Old and Middle Chinese, or a variant thereof which is spoken by the Zhao people. The Shang characters compare favorably to the ancient Proto-Saharan script used by the Harappans in the Indus Valley, and the Manding script used in the ancient Sahara and Crete. Clyde Winters outlined the spread of the Proto-Saharan script to Harappa and throughout the Sahara African and Asian by the Dravidians and the Manding. Evidence of Chinese writing first appears around 2000 BC as pottery markings. The shell and bone characters represented writing. They were not pictures but wedges similar to African cuneiform. The Shang symbols compare favorably with ancient Manding symbols as well. Although there are different contemporary pronunciations for these symbols, they have the same meaning and shape. This suggests the genetic relationship between these scripts because we know that the present pronunciation of the Chinese symbol probably has little relationship to the ancient pronunciation of Chinese spoken in the Jia and Shang times when these characters were first used. This cognation of script supports the proposed Dravidian and Manding migration and settlement of China during the Jia times. The identification of the first hero of China, Hu Nak Kunte, as a member of the Kunte clan of the Manding speakers of Africa is supported by the close relationship between the Manding languages and the Chinese. Even though we do not know the ancient pronunciation of many Chinese signs, many Chinese and Manding words share analogy and suggest a Manding substratum for Chinese. I mentioned Black Shang, so I will further explain. There were two Shang empires. The first Shang dynasty was Shang Li, meaning Black Shang. It was ruled by Li Shang or Black Shang. For the last 273 years of the Shang Empire, the capital was situated at Anyang. The Shang Empire based at Anyang was founded by the Yin nationality. We call this empire Shang Yin. Thus we have Shang Li Empire and the Shang Yin Empire. The Yin were classical Mongoloid people related to the Tai and other small Mongoloid Austronesian-speaking people situated in Southeast Asia. The use of the blackbird as the father of Zhai relates to the blackbird as a popular totem of black ethnic groups in China. This indicates that the founders of Shang were of mixed origin. The bird myth I just mentioned, which is centered on the east coast of China, suggests black origin for Shang, since this area was the heartland of ancient China. Both the ancient Chinese and Africans had similar naming practices. As in Africa, the Shang child had both a day name and a regular name. The Shang child was named according to the days of the sun on which he was born. There were 10 days in each sun. These days are called the 10 celestial signs. In the mulberry tree tradition, one day 10 suns rose from a mulberry, and the archer Yi shot them down. He actually only shot 9 down. The suns in reality were birds. The bird myth refers to the blackbirds that founded the Shang dynasty. The fact that only one of the 10 birds survived the arrows of the archer of Yi may be related to the unification of the 10 clans of the Shang dynasty. The reference to blackbirds in the Chinese literature relate to the African origin of the Shang rulers. The use of the term blackbird relates to the fact that these blacks had a bird as their totem. There is a similar account in Native American history, where the blackbird rescues the red bird from the white bird, which retreats back into the caves. This analogy is a reference to the Negroid releasing the red Indian from the clutches of the European colonialism. We know that birds do not live in caves. The cave is a reference to the mountains of Europe, the Caucasus Mountains. And as far as blacks in Asia today, many Africans and Chinese mixed and moved far north into Tibet, where they become known as nomads and live a very similar life to the Africans in Kenya. The Dravidian speakers originally came from Nubia. They were related to the Sea group people. The Shang culture was founded by the Kushites, thus the name Yi, meaning great bowman, thus corresponding to Stu, the name for the founders of the Tat Seti, the first monarchy in history. The Yi seem to have lived in both North and South China. Fu Su Nin in Yi His Tunga Shao makes it clear that the Shang culture bearer remained allied to the rest of the Yi people who lived in southern China. The founders of Jia are usually referred to as Yue, as opposed to Yi. It would appear that most of Yi were Dravidian speakers, while Yue were Manding speakers. The first Shang king of Yuan Wang, meaning black king. Yuan means black. He was called Yuan Di, meaning black emperor. The founder of the Shang dynasty was called Yuan Nao, meaning black bird. Another Shang king was called Yuan Mu, meaning black oxen. And the list goes on and on and on and on. The African slave trade. Much of the so-called African slave trade was fabricated and widely exaggerated. There was no trade. An independent source showing that the so-called Indians on the eastern seaboard, also called Terra Nova, were Moors, is called the book African and Native Americans by Jack D. Forbes. He shows in the book how many so-called Native American Indians were sold into slavery in Africa and Europe. This is the opposite direction in which we were taught the slave trade went. These Native Americans or Indians were classified as Negroes and blacks in the slave books of Seville, Spain, and elsewhere. On page 29, he says, and I quote, "Slaves from Terra Nova show up in the slave markets of Seville and Valencia very soon after 1500. For example, in Valencia during the period to 1516, we find in 1503 Miguel Man, in 1505 Juan and Pedro, and in 1507 Antonio and Juan Amarco. In 1515 Ali, now Melchor, and in 1516 Catalina. They were all classified as Negroes," unquote. Now, think about this. If we were first brought to North America around 1619, or even as early as 1555 for that matter, then how are they taking slaves from Newfoundland to Europe?
I want you to realize that what he just said was the way we learned the slave trade was completely wrong. And even it was another YouTuber, what's his name, Dan Calloway, about 2-3 years ago. He found a document showing that there was more slaves sold from America to Africa than Africa to America. And so when he said and this is what he's talking about, like they were kidnapping the American so-called Indian Moor and selling them into slavery.
Before 1520. Keep in mind that one of the Native Americans even had the name Ali, and all were classified as Negroes once they reached Valencia. How did a Native American in 1515 have a Moorish name, Ali? At least 3,000 Americans, so-called Indians, are known to have been shipped to Europe between 1493 and 1501, the Columbus expeditions, with the likely total possibly double that. Most were sent to the Seville area, where they seemed to show up in the slave markets as Negroes. These are major countries.
And this is super important. Let me tell you why. In put it like this, the Moors ruled from 711 to 1492, right? So when the Moors fell, a lot of them went back home. That's why they said they're still trying to figure out how the Moors introduced Europe into 400 types of sweet potatoes when they conquered it. They're telling you now that, Columbus came in 1492 and stole everything he could see. As they say, he never came to America, but that's how they tell the history. But they're saying from 1493, they was sending Moors into Europe.
Contradictions to the whole slave trade myth. Blacks were always in America. The missing Indians are Negroes. The slaves sold on the slave markets in the South were initially the black people from right here in this hemisphere. As they took the lands here, they enslaved the inhabitants of those lands who were black. The tens of millions of Americans, so-called Indians, who disappeared after 1492 did not all die in the Holocaust inflicted within America. Many thousand were sent to Europe and Africa as slaves. The whole slave trade myth is that the whole story was given to us in reverse. A mass colony of Africans were not shipped from Africa to America, but the truth is that black Indians were shipped from America to Europe. They were then shipped from Spain to Africa as a commodity for African resources. These black Indians, now mistaken as Africans, were shipped back to America and classified as African slaves. This part of our history is what the school systems failed to mention in their history programs. Am I saying that there was no slave trade? There was indeed a kidnapping of Africans from Africa to America. However, it was the result of the mass shipment and slaughter of the Moors in America at the hands of the Columbus expeditions. Columbus's first journey in 1492 was a mission to capture gold, but he was sidetracked by the presence of the black Moors. Columbus sent the word back to the monarchs of Spain that they were what he referred to in his logs as the people of the Queen of Sheba. Columbus kidnapped Arawak Indians along with gold nuggets, exotic birds, and grain. Queen Isabella provided Columbus with 17 ships, 1,500 men, cannons, crossbows, guns, and attack dogs for the second voyage. Columbus's new mission was to conquer the West. When Columbus returned to the West, Haiti, and South America in 1493, he not only took raw materials and resources, but he abducted women. After a short time, the Arawaks resisted Columbus, and on March 25th, 1495, Columbus slaughtered thousands of Arawak native men, women, and babies. Columbus also rounded up 1,500 Arawaks and shipped them to Spain. Columbus became the first man known in history to send the first slaves across the Atlantic. Other nations rushed to emulate Columbus. In 1501, the Portuguese began to depopulate the Bituque Indians to Cape Verde as slaves. The Black Indian slavery destroyed the Indian nations of Natchez, the Yamasee, and the Pequots. Because of this, the first African slave raid took place in 1505 and was spearheaded by Columbus's son. When the Moors, the Indians of America, began dying and committing suicide, the labor was replaced with slaves from the Sahara in West Africa. Also, the gold and silver that Columbus extracted from America fueled a 400% inflation that eroded the economies of the non-European nations and helped Europe to develop a global market system. Africa suffered a great economical blow. The trans-Saharan trade collapsed because America supplied more precious gems than the African West Coast. African traders now only had one commodity that Europe wanted: slaves. African sultans thus sold their own black people into slavery to whites. It is safe to say that Columbus is solely responsible for slavery of the Moors from west to east and from east to west. This is the bottom of an African slave ship. These were called big bottoms as they were constructed to hold hundreds of Africans packed like sardines. These trips from Africa to America took up to 3 to 4 months from east to west. According to history, these hundreds of Africans urinated and defecated on themselves during the journey. Now come on, 4 months of constant urination and defecation? These slaves would have literally drowned. Does this story really make sense? The Dogons were already on American land because they simply sailed over by way of the worldwide wind and currents. The Dogons were already on American land because they simply sailed over by way of the worldwide wind and currents. The first Africans to set foot on American soil were in fact the Dogons of Mali, who used such currents as the Canary and the North Equilateral Current that recycles from West Africa to America and into the upper Atlantic Ocean. This was before the invention of sails. The Guinea Current flows eastward along the Guinea coast with frequent cycles out to the sea where it joins the South Equatorial. The second group of Africans to land in America were under the leadership of Abu Bakari in 1311 and had mixed in with the Olmecs and became known as the Washoe. The third group of Africans to land on American soil were the Idrisids, who were the ruling dynasty of southern Morocco and Mauritania, who came into Morocco before the invasion by the Dogon Malians and the Senegalese. This group of Moors arrived in 1727 with Mensa Khan Musa, who was searching for his ancestors of Abu Bakari. And indeed, the Washoes were Moors. Let's go back a little bit more and explore this topic about the Moors. I previously stated.
So when I told y'all earlier, and when all of the times that I talked, and I told you that Mansa Musa, because you see, Abu Bakari is Mansa Musa, and when they came here, it was like a couple generations came, like the first generation came, then 100 years later, the next generation, and they were coming here. So that's what they mean, and they can prove that Mansa Musa is actually one of the last Aztec king, Montezuma. Because Montezuma. You get what I'm saying? So these are the things in history that we got to pay attention to. We have been here. What he's saying is that we had already migrated over here by the thousands, mixed in everything, established civilizations, law, land, all that. And the slave trade happened. They didn't have to send anybody here. Now, nobody's saying the slave trade never happened, but it's not in the manner that they told it. They told the elaborate story like they conquered these people and was shipping them over here in mass, and it's not completely true.
That the Olmecs were of Mali, and that does make them Moors. Absolutely, the Olmecs were indeed Malian Moors. The Mayans were the descendants of the Malian Moors and were often referred to as Black Mexicans or Quetzalcoatl. There are ancient Mexican wall paintings that depict these Negroid kings as rulers and are unmistakably African. These Moors were the people who built the Great Pyramids all over South America, Peru, Canada, Alaska, and Georgia. Scattered all throughout North America along the Mississippi River and its tributaries are found mounds built out of tons of earth, tons and tons of earth. The people who built them were called the mound builders, and they were the descendants of the Malian Moors, the Olmecs. These Moors eventually migrated to North America from Mexico and became known as the Washita, the Yamasee, and the Ben Ismael tribe. The Ben Ismael tribe was a collection of what is known as the Lenape, the Wampanoag, and the Nanticoke Indians who migrated to Indiana and Illinois and referred to themselves as Moors, even though the United States government continued to classify them as Negroes in order to strip them of their indigenous rights. It is often not talked about, but the Moors had enslaved the Europeans before they enslaved blacks. Their women were sold like commodities into the harems and as concubines of wealthy Moors. This is the reason why the Moorish noble were, for the most part, bleached out and became as tawny Moors, Turks.
See, I always tell people, this is something I've been preaching a lot. Slavery was karma of what our ancestors did. Now, you heard them. Before the Moors came, or a lot of them settled back in America or settled in America, they had conquered Europe. This is the Renaissance era they don't teach in school. And they taught them how to read and to write, how to take baths, all of this stuff. Built the Vatican, that was the Moors' home, all the colleges, Luxor, all of that. And then they got ran out after they ruled it for almost 800 years. But they didn't enslave them completely. Well, they didn't do slavery like how we know it. They introduced them to servitude, but there was some things that was really wrong. So our ancestors were sex trafficking white women all over the world, like a slave trade. And this is where, when they conquered in America, it was like payback on a true historical point, if I could be honest. This is the history that's not spoken on. So when he was saying this, that the Moors had ruled over them, that's the other side of history. That's called the Renaissance, right? It's the Renaissance of Europe.
And Arabs, which are no more than,
I'm sorry, it's called the Spanish Renaissance.
Fixed mulatto races. This is also the reason for the Moors in the coats of arms of the noble European families, the so-called black nobility of Europe. The European nations paid tribute to the Moors well into the 18th century. In the book, The United States and Barbary Powers, the English, French, Dutch, Danes, and Swedes, and may I say all nations, are tributary to them. David McRitchie in the book, Ancient and Modern Britons, says the word blackmail is the result of this tribute paid to the Black Army, or black oppressors, as the English referred to them. The Moors had control of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. This is why the Marines sing of defeating the Moors, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, confirming the extent of the Moorish Empire and dominions of Amexem, or Atlantis. Here you see the first page of the...
That's deep. And I just told you that Mansa Musa, when he became the last Aztec king, his name was Montezuma. So it says the Marines sang to the, you know what I'm saying, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. And that's all the way across the water in like Italy, I believe. It's deep.
Moroccan Treaty of 1787. It should also be noted that Shakespeare's most famous Moor to the Moors. Well,
I had to go back because the Treaty of Peace and Friendship is the oldest treaty on the planet, and it's in America. Even when I go to court and when the cops are dealing with me, and I ain't going into too much detail, this is still honored today. Now, people, they do got a history in America. They say the European don't honor treaties, but it's always about how you stand on it. But I love this documentary because it's laying it out for you to show you where your descendancy come from in America. So now, past this episode, when we get into the destruction of the Black civilization, right? When we get into certain things, it'll make more sense because you're already understanding that the Olmecs, the Chinese came here looking for their ancient ancestors, right? Mansa Musa came here looking for his ancient ancestors. So we clearly have been here. And this is where the indigenous American truly comes from.
To the 18th century. In the book, The United States and Barbary Powers, the English, French, Dutch, Danes, and Swedes, and may I say all nations, are tributary to them. David McRitchie in the book, Ancient and Modern Britons, says the word blackmail is the result of this tribute paid to the Black Army, or black oppressors, as the English referred to them. The Moors had control of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. This is why the Marines sing of defeating the Moors, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, confirming the extent of the Moorish empire and dominions of Amexem, or Atlantis. Here you see the first page.
So for all the scholars that want to keep saying that the Moors wasn't an empire, it was just a name. For all of those people that always online and arguing that aspect that the Moorish Empire wasn't an empire, that it was just something that it was a term used by Europeans to classify dark skinned people in disrespect, it's not true.
Of the Moroccan Treaty of 1787. It should also be noted that Shakespeare's most famous Moor, Othello, is also described as a black African. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin worked closely with Moors in the Continental Congress to secure this treaty. In the Bevins collection, there are over 200 letters to the Bey of Morocco from the Continental Congress. There were many Moors in the Continental Congress working with the European Masons originally taught by the Moors to form Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new secular order of the ages, E pluribus unum, out of many peoples, nations, one. The Moroccan Treaty is very powerful because, according to the Constitution, treaties are the law of the land. This treaty specifically deals with Moors. The question that may arise, how do we know that where the treaty says Moors, the so-called black people of the time is being referred to? The Moors were considered citizens or part of the we the people who ratified the Constitution. It says, quote, thus an act was passed in Massachusetts on the 6th of March, 1788, forbidding any Negro not a subject of the Empire of Morocco or a citizen of the United States from tarrying in the Commonwealth, unquote. For this would show that those who were referred to as Negroes were actually Moors, and that they were on the same footing or status as citizens. Those who remembered that they were Moors used the Moroccan Treaty of 1787 to secure the rights on the same footing as the state citizens without otherwise being obligated members of their social equality. While those who were brainwashed into believing they were Negroes, descendants of Africans brought here by Europeans, were unprotected by the Moroccan Treaty, as well as the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. This document says, and I quote, a petition was presented to the House from free sundry Moors, subjects of the Emperor of Morocco, and residents in this state, praying that in case they should commit any fault amendable to be brought to justice, that they as subjects to a prince here in North America, in alliance with the United States of America, via the Moroccan Treaty of 1787, may be tried under the same laws as the citizens of the state would be liable to be tried, and not under the Negro Act, which was received and read. End quote. Thus, you have Moors back in 1789 saying what we say now. Our nationality is Moorish, not Negro, black, colored, etc.
Then I want to thank everybody for tapping in. And I say that we'll get back to this tomorrow, get to it. I think it's a lot to digest for episode 4. I want to let this sit on your mind, honestly. Let me talk to y'all for a second before I get out of here. A lot of time, hold on. Big me, little me. A lot of times we don't get the proper information to be able to move forward. And being able to see this documentary and to be able to help visually trace back these ideas, right? It's not about everything having to be right for you, but to be able to get these ideas and to be able to line them up to grasp concepts to go further, because you got to think outside the box in order to get to where you need to go, to understand the history and how real and unreal it is, right? Some things is myth because people don't want to fathom that things could be possible. But it's important to understand our connection as people to the land, to our ancestors, and how we are all intertwined with these ancient cultures. So I would say I'm in here today because I want us to, the people that watch this, want to leave comments. If you find this video and you find it helpful, write in the comments, like, subscribe, Tell people about it. Share the content. I'm your host, Willie Walker BH. Organic Minds, episode 4. We staying at it. We talked about the Moors, the Olmecs. We talked about the monkeys escaping with the viruses. And I just say stay positive, and I'm going to continue to open the box. And I hope that y'all stay in and stay tuned. We will be live almost every morning, if not every morning. And throughout the day, I got other content coming as well. So tap in, man. Shout out to Vintage and everybody who's been tapping in. Shout out all the people that's been following me for years, who we over here at Organic Minds. Hey, subscribe. Let me know how y'all feel. And in time, we do a dog giveaway. BH.